Red lights screamed across uncounted star systems as the impossible message echoed on every comm channel. Emergency alert. A human warship has breached the Invictus Stronghold. Everything shifted in that one moment. An upstart species was about to shake the galaxy's invincible powers. For millennia, humanity had been relegated to a footnote in the broader galactic legacy. While other races mapped the stars utilizing their ancient fleets and established councils, humans lived in a backwater of the galaxy. Technologically backward, dwarfed by the power of the more advanced civilizations. But what they lacked in experience, they made up for in raw tenacity and a fleeting flash of imagination unlike any other life form ever known. Yet as they languished in isolation, few realized that humanity was racing toward a crisis that would turn them from an afterthought into a force of legend. In the face of extermination, the Terran forces rallied to victory and, fueled by their newfound unity, soon swept out to the stars, bringing them unbidden to the attention of the galaxy. The Baradoth were avowed proselytizers of their implacable doctrine of expansion. Their systems were predicated on it, no upstart species too obscure to absorb. Conquest was their inheritance, and Earth was a seductive jewel they were willing to subjugate at any price. Although Earth was far from the heart of the Dominion's territories, the humans would not seem to submit. Negotiations, entreaties, even desperate pleas for neutrality, none could convince the Baradoth to do otherwise. In their hubris, the Dominion ambassadors told Earth what they wanted: total surrender and a payment of human labor. They expected no resistance. After all, who could withstand an empire that covered 1,000 worlds? But with extinction bearing down on them, humans, backed into a corner, found strength in desperation. The dispersed fleet that defended Earth was dreadfully inadequate. From retrofitted cargo vessels to a few ancient corvettes, it was a ragtag force even leaders from EarthX were skeptical could win. But a core team of pluck-driven officers had faith in a daring, improbable plan. If they could come at the heart of the Baradoth Dominion, its ever-represent stronghold, the Invictus, then they could shake the Empire's morale and make them retreat. Rumored to be the Dominion's backbone, the Invictus Stronghold was an enormous fortress, hewn into the crust of a desolate planet in the Afrin sector. Its expansive power grids and multi-level defenses rendered it all but immune to a traditional attack. The fortress was so storied that it goes down in history as the Stronghold, a structure that had resisted centuries of warring. The idea of putting it under siege, to do so, particularly by a species the Dominion regarded as primitive, felt like pure fantasy. Many scoffed at the notion, but among the ranks of humanity, a brilliant strategist by the name of Admiral Una Caldwell had faith that it was this very impossibility that would best serve them. A soft-spoken woman of iron resolve, Caldwell had reviewed every plausible maneuver of Dominion tactics. She studied bits of intelligence snatched from black market traders, read scattered historical accounts of the fortress's weaknesses, and melded them into a guiding principle. The Dominion would never suspect a smaller, weaker enemy to strike at their most powerful stronghold. As dissenters made the case for playing more conservatively, Caldwell became more convinced. Every defensive line we maintain, she continued, the Baradoth will dismantle, stone by stone. But if we hit first, and hit hard, and hit where they least expect, we can shatter their will to fight. With Earth's leadership in shambles, Caldwell was joined by General Harris West, who had been one of the strongest proponents for a more assertive approach. West actually was in charge of the battered Terran ground forces, veterans of border skirmishes too numerous to count who had seen the Dominion's brutalities with their own eyes. He and Caldwell created a secret war council, an assembly of engineers, intelligence experts, and veterans from every corner of human-controlled space, to devise a daring infiltration of the Invictus Stronghold. Their covert initiative coalesced around an experimental warship called Requiem, designed in secret lunar shipyards and using every advanced technology we could find or invent. Requiem was a freak. It bristled with prototype energy cannons, stealth modules reverse-engineered from captured Baradoth drones, and a maze of corridors intended for infiltration. Desperation fused with genius covered every inch of the vessel. Yet the question persisted. Why risk so much on what amounted to a near-suicidal mission? The Dominion already had several fleets gathering to launch a final assault against the major colonies of Earth. Even if Requiem somehow pulled off an amazing infiltration, they would be alone in a system ringed with the Dominion's most powerful warships. Caldwell's response, our only way to survive is to demonstrate to them that we can inflict wounds on them in places that they feel invulnerable. If the Dominion learn of a compromised Invictus stronghold, they will hesitate. The Empire exists through fear, fear of their unquenchable strength. Remove that fear, and their confidence evaporates. In that window, we bargain from a position of strength, not beg for scraps. Thus, the plan took shape. A crack crew, chosen for bravery and competence, trained hard aboard Requiem. Pilots learned to compensate for the ship's erratic thrusters and repurpose shield generators. But engineers examined alien power couplings to ensure that the warship could run silently behind enemy lines. Intelligence officers memorized floor plans of the Stronghold, tracking high-security databanks, reactor cores, and strategic choke points. Rumors spread from one of Earth's scattered colonies to the other that something enormous was about to happen. Morale soared. Blinded by the immediacy of the Dominion threat, humanity started to think, for the first time, maybe it wasn't doomed after all. While the Baradoth envoys were still giving their final ultimatums, the humans quietly dedicated all their remaining resources to completing Requiem, placing their last sliver of hope into the hands of Admiral Caldwell and General West. The day of launch approached. Caldwell conferred with West over encrypted channels and hidden bunkers, hashing out the route the infiltration team would take and its objectives while in the building. While outwardly the heads of the globe strained to keep up the pretense of negotiation to buy time, behind the scenes the entire operation was almost ready. The official line said, "We are open to peaceful resolutions." But the secret directive was perfectly explicit. Give us a chance to hit this monster where it lives. The stakes were nothing less than the survival of humanity. If Requiem failed, then the Dominion's fleets would scour Earth of all life. If it worked, if this implausible gamble somehow penetrated the most impenetrable fortress in the Dominion's armory, it could tilt the entire balance of power. Legends often start in the dark hour, when a belittled people commits to the belief that fear will no longer drive them. And so humanity hesitated, teetering on the brink, prepared to risk everything on one eager toss of the cosmic dice. When Requiem fired its engines and pulled away from that secret dock for the first time, those thrusters hummed, low and subdued, echoing the ghostly enthusiasm of an entire species' hope. Admiral Caldwell, standing on the bridge, looked into the stars. Her lips moved in a quiet promise. We will not fall. We will demolish their castle and show them who we are. And thus a handful of humans, not least the Dominion, with relentless determination and a touch of madness, dived into a destiny no one foresaw. Having previously written them off as a small race, the Terrans now sought to cement their name in the annals of every single war manual and military treatise in the galaxy. Their first target, the Invictus Stronghold. The preparations for the assault were daunting. It was a race against time from your very first moment outside the lunar docks. In every colony, engineers raced to complete last-minute calibrations for the warship's advanced stealth systems. Ample supplies, ammunition, medkits, infiltration gear were stowed in double-latched cargo compartments. As members of the elite strike team found, once they leaped into Dominion territory there would be no turning back. Victory, or a fiery defeat, would be theirs. The route to the Afrin sector was a classic lesson in cloak and dagger. Under Admiral Caldwell's guidance, Requiem made a circuitous trek through unpathed star lanes, sneaking around recognized Dominion patrol routes. They pushed the trajectory right away the moment a Baradoth scanner light showed. Pilots and navigation officers labored. Anxiety in the halls ran high. That tension was in every conversation, every glance. Even the hum of the ship's engines appeared to know how much hush-hush was needed. But there were frustrations all around as unexpected hurdles continued to arise. When one emergency drill reached a caustic level, a power coupling in the stealth module overloaded and nearly triggered a meltdown in the main reactor. Only the quick thinking of the chief engineer has prevented disaster. She and her crew worked round the clock, rerouting power and strengthening the warship's delicate systems. For every flaw they patched, another one appeared. The clock was ticking, and every technical setback risked unraveling the entire mission. While the engineers grappled with hardware, the infiltration team trained for their ground operation inside the Stronghold. They ran elaborate simulations modeled on Dominion architecture, analyzing every alleyway and defense turret map scraped from old intel. These drills were led by Sergeant Talia Novak, a stoic Special Forces operative. She hammered the squad, making sure they could penetrate blast doors, disable security nodes, and respond to evolving scenarios. No plan survives first contact, she told them, but will adapt more quickly than they can react. Morale slept in strange beds with grim determination, and everyone knew the odds were more than daunting. The Invictus Stronghold was not just a fortress. It was a symbol. The Dominion's expansion into the galaxy relied on the notion that when threatened, they could simply fall back behind its impassable defenses. Invading its gates was tantamount to defying the entire Dominion's imperviousness. But the idea of making history, of doing the impossible, fired up the crew. At long last, the day came that the infiltration route of Requiem crossed paths with that of the Dominion. Pilots snuck the warship behind the shadow of a huge gas giant, its crescent of metal and carbon absorbing the final approach in the planetary magnetic field. Caldwell, steadying her nerves with military precision, issued the command to activate the stealth module. The whole vessel shuddered as it slipped from standard sensor detection. Their infiltration had begun. Concealed from prying eyes, Requiem slipped deeper into the Afrant sector. Multiple Dominion battleships lurked just out of detection range, scanning for signs of intrusion. One miscalibrated thruster burn could expose them, but the crew's discipline prevailed. Hour by meticulous hour, they wove a path through the Dominion's mighty perimeter. Tense voices crackled over the comms. Sensor operators signaled near misses with patrol routes. They made it through unharmed and edged ever closer to their objective. And then, in the stark silence of space, the massive Invictus Stronghold appeared. And even while standing far away, it loomed in the skyline with an impressive silhouette. Armed emplacements prickled along jagged spires. Tiers of walls stuck out of the surface of the rocky planet, each protected by energy fields stacked on top of each other. Massive docking rings riddled the fortress's orbit, acting as both supply lines and heavy gun platforms. Even through vantage screens, it was obvious that any direct attack would be suicidal in even normal circumstances. Requiem was another fusion site where the infiltration team prepared for deployment. Sergeant Novak was at the drop bay, watching the readouts for the fortress's external defenses. Faint outlines of shield projectors were becoming visible, if not already arranged into concentric layers. The plan depended on a narrow corridor. Tant the cloak Requiem close enough to put a ground team on the fortress's surface, employ sabotage to beak the shields from within, and then punctuate it with a catastrophic strike on the stone of the fortress's core reactor. If they succeeded, the impenetrable bastion would inherit a cratered husk. In the command center, Admiral Caldwell was studying the data feed. Time was short. The Dominion might not have caught up to them yet, but every minute they spent here risked random sensor sweeps. And with a silent nod of her head, granted the last green light. The infiltration would begin now. Requiem coasted toward the fortress, following the round of the barren planet. Chief Engineer Reyes hoped the power couplings for the stealth module would hold. One catastrophic malfunction, and the whole Dominion defense grid would illuminate them like a shooting range. At the optimal angle, Requiem decelerated into a near drift. A specialized docking clamp reached out and latched onto a sealed maintenance hatch of the fortress's outer hull. The infiltration team in pressure suits moved quickly through an airlock and into the fortress itself. What they found was a maze of twisting hallways, bathed in a sickly green light from glowing strips on the ceiling. Dominion drones patrolled frequently, looking out for intruders. Well rehearsed, Novak and her people moved to disable security cameras, hacking doorways. Sometimes they had to send in a drone with silent takedowns that raised no alarm. With every step deeper into enemy territory, tension mounted. In the meantime, Dominion communications lines ran through the fortress, buzzing with routine traffic. Nobody suspected a human infiltration, and why would they? The Bastion was the pinnacle of Dominion power. And yet, slight anomalies started to seep through. A camera feed had gone dark in Corridor D47. A door system in Sublevel 3 stopped responding. The fortress's automated systems identified these as minor glitches, but within those corridors, Novak's team worked feverishly to fortify key choke points. In a control hub overlooking the fortress's planetary shield generator, Dominion officers detected a minor drop in shield output. This was it, the sabotage of the infiltration team. Cores were slowly being ramped up in temperature as they had tapped into the generator's coolant lines. If there was enough pressure built up, the whole system would collapse. Even so, the Dominion's first response was not alarm but confusion. They could not imagine that a cloaked human warship was docking practically in their nose. But illusions never last. As sabotage spread, the fortress's AI started connecting malfunctions in its systems. Drones discovered a body. The alarm klaxon blared. A red glow washed the corridors. Dominion soldiers, now on high alert, scrambled to intercept the unidentified invaders. Novak's unit went from stealth to firefights, firing into people mounds of alien soldiers that poured from turbolifts and side passages. Plasma bolts ricocheted, and the infiltration squad returned fire using human-engineered railguns that shredded through Dominion armor. Meanwhile, outside, Requiem pulled dangerously close to the fortress's facade. Its stealth field shimmered as Dominion scanners cataloged the area in a grid pattern. Caldwell braced himself at the command console, expecting the worst. There was no time left for subtlety. Signals exploded over Dominion channels. Some sort of breach had happened. Warships in the area turned their bows toward the fortress, preparing to converge on the site. Requiem was going to get trapped in a pincer if they didn't hurry. This was the point of no return, the Swiss investigators' report found, noting that Novak's infiltration team had arrived at their primary target on the fortress, the reactor control center. It was protected by elite force of auto turrets and squads of Dominion shock troops. Explosions detonated in the hallways as the humans forced their way in using breaching charges. The team lost members. Some Brother Knights were cut down by Dominion plasma fire while attempting to shield others from the shot. As painful as it was, their sacrifice had created a path to the control interface. Novak shoved a data spike into the system, allowing their hacking AI to bypass safety protocols. If all went well, the fortress's primary reactor would be driven into a catastrophic power surge. Outside, Dominion corvettes and cruisers converged on Requiem's position. Caldwell had one last card to play. The warship's advanced weapon array, untried in a full-scale engagement, but potentially powerful enough to fend off reinforcements long enough for the infiltration team to escape. All gunnery crews, we've got weapons free, she called, voice brittle. We've just got to keep them off us. Otherwise, our people inside aren't going to make it. Requiem sprang to life, disengaging its stealth field to reallocate power to weapons. Ion cannons mounted on the dorsal. Turrets activated, and arcs of crackling energy leapt into the nearest Dominion corvettes. Twisting in the void, the human warship performed maneuvers that felt unnaturally possible for a ship of its size, going wide and outflanking slower Dominion cruisers, beating their flank with plasma-laced rail slugs. Dumbfounded, the Dominion was, rightfully, lit. How had a human ship come so close? Where did it get its advanced firepower? The balance of the battle was in the balance. If the fortress's defenses activated in full, Requiem would die. Dominion reinforcements would crush them inside if Novak's team was too slow in the reactor sabotage. Both hands on the clock crept closer to midnight. At the reactor level, alarms screamed like banshees. Dominion soldiers tried to pour into the control center, but Novak's squad resisted with everything at their disposal. There were corpses strewn across the hallways. The reactor whirred ominously as it spun toward meltdown. It was just as Dominion reinforcements were closing and that Novak's hacking suite completed its final override. The reactor's emergency protocols initiated a meltdown sequence in the fortress's core. The countdown began. Bridge team, we have a meltdown in progress. Novak shouted into her comm. We're moving to extraction. Roger that, Caldwell said, her voice steady. We're carving a path for you now. Hatches blew inward, and Novak's squad raced through tangles of smoke and warped metal. Shots whizzed past. Standing at the docking clamp was an emergency airlock still attached to Requiem. Dominion security forces flocked to them. Yet the infiltration party was able to fend off the onslaught, squeezing into the lock moments before it slammed shut. The fortress's internal meltdown alarms crescendoed as the airlock cycled. Aboard the Averas, Novak's confirmation back on the bridge. Novak. We're aboard, Admiral. Get us out of here. No more stealth, no more secrets. The engines of Requiem roared to full ignition. Explosions radiated through the fortress's outer layers as internal meltdown cascaded, cracking shield projectors and baking main defenses. Alien admirals on the nearest Dominion vessels looked on in horror. The Invictus Stronghold, their impenetrable fort, was ripping itself apart from within, by humans of all things. Dominion cruisers and battleships charged forward, hoping to box Requiem in orbit, but the fortress's own cascade created shockwaves that unraveled local space. The dying gasps of the fortress sent debris flying in every direction, scattering Dominion ships to either side. Amid that chaos, Requiem sailed clear, bruised but undaunted. As the vessel broke free of the fortress's gravity well, a great eruption ignited the planet's surface. Where the Invictus Stronghold, once the greatest bastion of Dominion power, was reduced to ashes in a cataclysmic conflagration. In distant reaches of the galaxy, Dominion outposts picked up the initial sensor readings of the fortress's destruction. A gasp of disbelief rippled through their ranks. They called for a name of the attackers. The answer was staggering. It was human forces. As if in that moment, the conflict peaked. These fearless infiltrators from Earth could hardly believe their good fortune. The invincible bastion had been broke, and the Dominion still staggered, aghast in holy shock. At the same time, battle to save Earth would not be truly won until the entirety of the Dominion war machine felt the blowback. But for now, the impossible had happened. The Invictus Stronghold was conquered. As soon as Requiem broke free from the fortress's influence, Admiral Una Caldwell let herself take one breath of triumph. All her nerves still tingled with tension, but the immediate objective had been accomplished. They had obliterated the Baradoth Dominion's most powerful bastion. Just a few weeks ago, imagining this outcome would have seemed an exercise in futility. Now, it was the undeniable reality. But there was no time to relish victory. Dominion warships continued to roam the sector, throwing frantic scans for the audacious intruder. The meltdown that engulfed the Stronghold triggered inflexible chain reactions throughout the planet's floor that blasted plumes of ash and poisonous gases roaring into the skinny environment. If Requiem dallied, the Dominion would come in overwhelming numbers. Caldwell stood on the bridge of the warship, watching the chaos unfold on the tactical holomap. Blips portraying Dominion cruisers converged from multiple vectors, but they hovered with curious timidity, rattled, perhaps, by the fortress's abrupt collapse. Caldwell took advantage of their confusion. "Attention all hands," she continued, her voice booming over the internal comm system. "We're making a direct break through the sector outskirts. Gunners, keep them busy. Jedi, plot our course for a hyperlight jump once the lane is clear." In engineering, Chief Reyes and her team grappled with damaged power lines. The shockwaves of the meltdown had localized enough to rattle Requiem, disabling half the railguns and partially frying the navigation core. Emergency fixes forced the system back into working order. Every minute mattered, because if they couldn't jump soon, the Dominion would surround them. In the open, Dominion captains broadcasting over their personal comm networks, trying to get a handle on what had happened. A species they thought meaningless had somehow made its way into the unassailable Invictus Stronghold. Disbelief mixed with fury. Pride called for swift retribution, but strategic sense counseled caution. Until they figured out how the humans had pulled off this infiltration, the Dominion risked walking into even craftier traps. While that decision hung in the air, Requiem ascended to the sector's outer edge. Lesser Dominion corvettes went to intercept, only to be held in check by the warship's laterally improvised ballistic cannons. Under normal circumstances, the Baradoth would have pushed a more methodical attack, but inappropriately for them, seeing the fortress, a stronghold that had stood for centuries, reduced to molten debris, unsettled them. ways they could not convey. Finally, the battered Requiem escaped the planet's gravitational well. With the fortress's defenses down, nothing stood between them and freedom. Caldwell didn't hesitate. "Engage hyperlight sequence," she commanded. "Set course to fallback coordinates near the Terran defensive line." The whine of the hyperlight engine crescendoed. In a flash of radiant energy, the warship was blipped from Dominion sensors, and the galaxy was left with an image that would echo for centuries: the desecrated remains of the Invictus Stronghold, the bedrock of the Dominion's enforced unassailability. Far away in the Afrin sector, the scattered colonies of Earth waited, ears tuned for word, any word, on the mission's fate. There had been no updates for weeks beyond cryptic confirmations of travel. Tempers flared. Some naysayers thought Caldwell's scheme brash. But secretly, a select cadre of Terran leaders held out hope for Requiem in covert command centers. They understood one success, however unlikely, could tip the cosmic scales. It arrived in dramatic fashion. A flurry of transmissions blasted across all channels, mere moments after Requiem lit its hyperlight exit close to the Terran lines. One was an urgent message from Dominion strongholds in the sector: emergency. The Invictus Stronghold, destroyed by unknown human vessel. Earth's leaders and the hundreds of worlds of the Terran diaspora erupted in disbelief and joy. Once a fragile ember, hope was ignited into an inferno of celebration. When Requiem eventually returned to Terran space, battered and bloodied from the damage it took, it was hailed like a conquering hero. Ordinary and reserved, Admiral Caldwell suddenly became the main character in a moment of history. Crew members stumbled onto the deck of the closest starbase, battered but victorious, greeted by cheers from throngs of spectators. General West paced the docking bay, eagerly waiting for results. When Caldwell stepped off the ramp, the two raised eyeless sockets and exchanged a wordless salute that conveyed volumes of relief and pride. Words swept through every Terran settlement. One daring, impossible act of defiance had transformed humanity's darkest hour. In all but its vast military, the Baradoth Dominion was faltering. The psychological impact and trauma of having lost the Invictus Stronghold echoed through its command structure. In the far corners of the galaxy that once scoffed at humans, whispers became headlines. They broke the fortress. The humans accomplished the impossible. But the battle was far from over. The Dominion still had fleets that outnumbered and outgunned anything Earth could bring. Furious at the fortress's fall, some of the Dominion's top warlords called for a wholesale genocide of humanity immediately, eradicate them as a punishment for their insolence. Others, more cautious, sensed that Earth's cunning may be a threat greater than raw numbers indicated. That would have come as its leaders were beginning to oppose it internally. Politicking in the wake of Caldwell's success, Terran diplomats moved to negotiate terms with any Dominion group willing to come to terms. They suggested ceasefires, promising to make certain technologies or resources available to the Dominion if only they would withdraw their war fleets. Not all Dominion leaders could be reasoned with, but with the Empire's morale shaken, a few came to the conclusion that negotiation was better than continuing to suffer humiliations at the hands of the Terrans. Admiral Caldwell and General West were now at the command of Earth's new strategic endeavor. Instead of waiting for the Dominion's next step, they decided to take the initiative. Humans had shown they could hit the Empire's core by conducting raids and feints that forced the Dominion to stay on the defensive in secret war councils they developed. Even without increasing Earth's fleet much further, it could still outsmart the lumbering Empire by employing guerrilla tactics and advanced infiltration. Others argued for caution. Our fortress mission had been a runaway success, and we were not to overreach. The Terran economy had all but bankrupted itself constructing Requiem. Supply chains came under pressure, and entire colonies were forced to ration basic necessities to finance the war effort. Further major offensives could spread them too thin. Caldwell acknowledged the danger, but also realized that momentum was key. "Victory is a game of follow-through," she said, "and if we can bring more worlds who chafe under Dominion oppression into our campaign, we can flip the power equilibrium of the galaxy." In the days that followed, the diplomatic envoys of Earth made quiet overtures to other species that had been conquered or intimidated by the Baradoth. They visited the Akron, a proud people whose industrial output rivaled the Dominion. They wooed the Keldori, a fragmented species known for their stealth strategies that had once held off the Baradoth to a standstill. One rumor followed another. The humans had vanquished Invictus. Perhaps they could unshackle the Dominion's grip on the rest of us as well. For the Dominion's top leadership, this was the worst-case scenario. Their stronghold in shambles, the Empire's dreaded image sullied, would-be rebels invigorated. Tempestuous debates took place behind closed doors. Some called for a direct assault on Earth to restore fear. Others maintained that the humans' cunning rendered them uniquely dangerous and counseled a negotiated settlement. The Empire's monolithic unity broke. Requiem, after repair, became the tip of Earth's new offensive spear. Backward engineering the information obtained from the fortress sabotage, Chief Engineer Reyes upgraded the ship's weapons and shielding system yet again. Sergeant Novak of the Infiltration Squadka was recovered from pain, ready to strike again. Through Terran channels buzzed a feeling of determined optimism. They had done the impossible before. They could do it again. The decisive shift happened in a climactic standoff in the border colony of Starlit Reach. Shamed by the defeat of the Dominion, warlords gathered a massive fleet to wipe out this human world. The plan was uncovered by Terran intelligence, and Requiem was able to arrive in time to face off with the invaders. But this time, the humans weren't alone. A handful of allied ships, Keldori frigates and Akron support carriers, leapt through to the system, each having quietly entered into secret pacts with Earth's leadership. Caught between Requiem's advanced infiltration tactics and the new coalition's combined might, the Dominion would once again be forced to suffer a humiliating retreat. Across the galaxy, the message was clear. Humanity was not to be eliminated with a single stroke, and now they had allies. That second blow to Dominion pride, coming so soon after the destruction of Invictus, set off a wave of fractures in the Empire. Major factions broke off in turns, refusing to dispatch additional troops into what they described as the human quagmire. Others hatched new plans, none of which ignited the same confidence that the Invictus stronghold once did. That turn of events prompted Dominion leadership to entertain a truce, if only to avoid an even bigger mutiny from within. The war wasn't over. Fighting flared in several sectors. But humanity had achieved its paramount goal, making the Dominion question its own invulnerability. By penetrating the impregnable citadel, they demonstrated that no empire, however entrenched, was immune to contestation. When the news of the incident spread, alien powers across the galactic stage, some neutral, some long-standing enemies of the Dominion, suddenly began treating humans as equals. Bugged diplomatic channels with a question that few would have asked a year ago. What are Earth's conditions for an alliance? Sitting at the negotiating tables, Terran ambassadors were in a remarkable place. Courted, respected, even feared. Throughout it all, Admiral Caldwell and General West were steady anchors. They never lost focus of the original purpose of the mission: secure humanity's right to exist free of the shackles of the Dominion's tyranny. The victory had unleashed a firestorm of change at Invictus Stronghold, though that change needed to be harnessed carefully. Caldwell, West, and their allies found their way through this new reality, juggling a thirst for revenge with the practicalities of lasting peace. During their unlikely victory, humans found a new identity. They were no longer the underdogs of the cosmos, the overlooked species. They were the ones to have broken the greatest fortress in the known galaxy. That one act had overturned the balance of power, beginning a new age where malice and determination counted as much as millennia of established strength. In that moment, the unthinkable went a history. The day the emergency alert blasted, a human warship has breached the enemy's stronghold. The galaxy got a lesson in a deep truth. A species forced into a corner, with a will that cannot be shattered, can rewrite the fates of empires. By mere wits and guts and sheer will, humanity had shattered the chains of destiny. In the future, new alliances, conflicts, and betrayals would unfold across the cosmic stage. But one lesson would endure for all time: never again underestimate Earth. News of the destruction of the Invictus stronghold ricocheted along every known star lane like a solar flare. On frontier worlds, in the great halls of ancient empires, one question was whispered among traders, spies, diplomats, and the like. Have you heard what the humans did? For untold generations, unfeasible conquest had been synonymous with the Baradoth Dominion. The fortress was their crowning achievement, and now it was a smoking ruin thanks to the actions of a single Terran warship. For humanity, it is a half response of relief, half of resolve. But there was no denying the morale boost, despite the lingering threat of all-out Dominion annihilation. Terrans were not fragmented, uncertain people awaiting subjugation anymore. They had demonstrated their ingenuity on the biggest stage imaginable. Their name had become mean something, bringing about hope and terror in equal measure. Admiral Una Caldwell, the architect of victory, wouldn't let compliments distract from the hard work ahead. In a closed-door meeting with Terran leaders, she called for consolidating alliances made during the aftermath of Invictus's fall. Before the Dominion could find its feet, diplomatic pacts, trade agreements, and mutual defense treaties needed to be cemented. A move to rest on laurels would be catastrophic. But Earth's new role was precarious. Forging a coalition to hold back the Dominion was job one. Despite the fortress assault having reduced her infiltration squad, Sergeant Talia Novak took some comfort from training the new generation of special forces. Her experiences in the fortress's corridors informed Terran doctrine on how to hit what seemed like impregnable targets. An assignment that had seemed impossible had uncovered universal truths about ingenuity, trickiness, and stoic bravery. Chief Engineer Luciana Reyes, worn down by weeks of crisis management, had taken a sabbatical to chronicle her experiences in designing and maintaining Requiem. She had hopes that, by sharing those breakthroughs, future Terran ships would arrive at something comparable to what the warship had achieved without this mission's crippling toll in resources and blows to mental well-being. Inspired by sense and sensibility, the galaxy's most illuminating innovations are born in the fires of desperation. Back on Earth and its colonies, rejoicings mingled with solemn tributes to those who lost their lives. Statues and plaques remembered the bravery displayed at the Invictus Stronghold, and in every Terran settlement there were echoes of pride in how far they had come. Parents described that day when a single human warship defied an empire, instilling a new belief. If humanity could do this, no challenge was too great. Galactic powers took note. Narrating the novels in order, though, would end with the war in the first of the 23rd century titles, and the Keldori and the Akron quietly signed deeper alliances with Earth, encouraged into treason against the Dominion's threats. And others still, more distant, waited to see if the humans would be too presumptuous, or if the Dominion would retaliate with renewed fury. The cosmic chessboard was overturned, and Terrans were no longer pieces. Yet the bottom line still held. Humanity had taken the darkest gamble imaginable and won. No fortress was actually impenetrable. No empire was truly eternal. The will that had pushed a previously tasteless species over the unpassable ennobled that adaptability, boldness, and an unyielding urge to live could change the fate of the galaxy. Ultimately, there was only one appropriate correspondence for the entirety of the cosmos. For never again shall we tempt the brave heart of mankind, for when cornered, he will pierce any barrier, topple any tower, and turn the impossible into a grand new truth.